All right, so for the last few problems, what we've got is I have an x to the 3/2 power equals 27. And so what I would like to do is get rid of that 3/2 power. So remember, if I've got a power raised to a power, for instance, if I have x to the 5th raised to the 6th, that would be x to the 30th. So as long as I do it to both sides of the equation, I can do anything I want to. So I'm going to raise this side to the 2/3 power, because 2 times 2 is 6, over 2 times 2 is 6. So that's going to change into x to the 1st power. And so 27 needs to be taken to the 2/3 power as well. So in your calculator, what you're going to want to do is take 27 raised to the, so this button right here, raised to the, and then in parentheses, you need to put to the 2/3 power. And you'll get 9. So make sure you put that power in parentheses. Now let me tell you what just happened. What you just did was you took 27 and you squared it, and you got 27 times 27 is 729. And then you took a cubed root, which gave you 9. Another way to think about that is to take a cubed root first. So 27 cubed root gives you 3, and then 3 squared is 9. So either way, you got a 9. Okay, so let's try another one. We have x minus 1 to the 2/5 power is 9. So what power am I going to raise both sides to? I'm going to raise both sides to the 5/2 power. So that gives me x minus 1 to the 1st power equals 9 to the 5/2 power. So really that's a square root of 9. So the square root of 9 is 3. And then 3 to the 5th power is 32. So if I take 9 raised to the, what power are we doing? 5/2 power. I just totally lied to you. Oh, because I was thinking of 2. I am so sorry. Because, yes, so it's 243. Okay, so I got x minus 1, and we got to check that, is 243. And then all I've got to do is add 1 to both sides and get 244. All right, so for the last two problems that we're going to be doing in this section, we've got to be a little bit more creative. We've got to go back to how to factor the difference of 2 cubes. No, we've got to go back to how to factor, hang on, my brain is all over the place. This is my daughter's notebook, if you can't tell. Okay, so we've got a 16x to the 4th. Minus the 41x squared plus the 25 is 0. And what we want to factor is, how do we factor a perfect square trinomial? So I notice that this is a perfect square. I notice that this is a perfect square. So I've got to check and see if this is actually a perfect square trinomial or not. It looks like it is, but I got to check to see if it is. So the way I do that is a set of parentheses squared equals 0. I'm going to take the square root of this side, which is 4x squared. I'm going to take the square root of this side, which is 5. And I'm going to match the sign in the middle. Okay? So now how do I check it? Because if this is a perfect square trinomial, then I'm done. But if it's not a perfect square trinomial, then I've got some work to do. So how do I check it? I need two numbers. Or I need to multiply these two numbers together, which gives me a negative 20, and double it, which gives me a negative 40. That doesn't match my middle term. That does not match my middle term. So this is going to go away, and we're going to factor this thing. And so instead of factoring and wondering what it is the whole time, what I'm going to do is use quadratic formula. So I have x squared is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so that should look familiar to you. So negative b is going to be positive 41 plus or minus, remember that this is all equal to x squared because this is an x to the fourth instead of an x squared. Okay, so I've got a negative 41 squared minus 4 times 16 times 25 all over 2 times 16. So that gives me 41 plus or minus, and I'm going to put this argument or the stuff underneath the radical in my calculator. So I have a negative 41 squared gives me 1681 minus 4 times 16 times 25 gives me 81. Stop moving. Okay. So I get 41 plus or minus the square root of 81 over 32. So 41 plus or minus 9 over 32, because the square root of 81 is 9. So 41 plus 9 is going to be 50 over 32, which reduces to what goes into 50 and 32. That's going to be a 2, so I get 25/16. And then 41 minus 9 is going to be 32 over 32, which is 1. So we've got to be careful because x squared equals these things. So x squared equals 25/16 and x squared equals 1. Okay, so I'm going to take a square root of both sides. So I get x equals plus or minus the square root of 25/16. Well, I know what the square root of 25/16 is. It's 5/4. So I get x equals plus or minus 5/4. So far I have x equals negative 5/4 and x equals positive 5/4. And now we're going to finish out this one. So take the square root of both sides. That gives me x equals plus or minus 1. So we have a positive 1 and a negative 1. And it doesn't matter the order that you do it in, but you've got 4 answers for that one. So let's try it again. We have x squared, or sorry, x to the fourth minus 4x squared minus 21 is 0. Okay. That's harder to see. Let me try. There we go. All right, I was trying to get rid of the shadow. Okay, so we're going to factor this. I need two numbers that multiply to negative 21 that add up to negative 4. So I've got two sets of parentheses equals 0. Instead of putting an x here, we're going to put an x squared here. Okay? Because this is not an x squared, this is an x to the fourth. So the square root of an x to the fourth is an x squared. Okay? So what are my two numbers? Negative 7 and positive 3. Okay? So I'm going to take this set, which is x squared minus 7, and set it equal to 0, and then x squared plus 3 and set it equal to 0. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So I get x squared is 7. Take a square root, and x equals plus or minus root 7. So far I've got a negative root 7 and I've got a positive root 7. With this one, I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. And I'm going to square root both sides, so I get x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 3. Well, the square root of a negative, this is I. So I have x equals plus or minus I root 3. So my other two answers are a negative I root 3 and a positive I root 3. And that is it for this section.